We got that. We got that. Oh, that's set up and okay, there we go. All right, we are live, guys. Second show for tonight, and we got independent wrestling legend and as well as a former WWE superstar, did some work in the late 90s and early 2000s. The one and only Derek Stone. How's it going, Derek?
Doing well. Thank you very much. That's a very kind introduction. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, only the best intros here. So yeah. How have you been doing lately? Just life and living?
Doing well. I don't know if you may or may not know, some of your listeners may not know either. I did suffer an injury fairly recently. So I'm recovering from that. A pretty serious injury, but it's going really well. I actually broke my patella, which is your kneecap, and tore my quadricep. So I had to have surgery for that, had that at the Mayo Clinic, and got it all taken care of. And it's been 8 weeks since the surgery. And so I'm cleared to sort of walk without a brace and actually do the real rehab. I've been doing rehab this whole time, but it's pretty mild stuff, ankle pumps, that kind of stuff. So actually today's a great day. Just talked to my orthopedic surgeon and he's like, I hope I never see you again. And I said, yeah, I hope so too, so yeah, that's kind of been taking up most of my life for the last 8 to 10 weeks or so. I had to cancel some bookings and things like that, which is I never like to do that, but I couldn't walk, so I can't wrestle, obviously, right? So,
Right.
But that's what's going on. But other than that, life is going very well, man.
Okay, yeah, definitely. Yeah, injuries are always never a good thing, of course, and of course, wrestling never a good way to get injured. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I always tell people though that look, I've been wrestling for 30 years, right? 30 years as of a couple of days ago, as a matter of fact. And I've only had two, including this recent injury, two serious injuries that have taken me out of action. So I knock on wood, I consider myself very, very lucky. I've got bumps and bruises, I have arthritis, I have spinal stenosis, I have all that other stuff, but nothing that's ever really knocked me down too much, except for those. So I think for 2 and 30 years is probably pretty good track record,
Yeah, definitely. There you go. Yeah, what was it? Early this year, I believe it was. I think it was back in July. We also had someone that celebrated 30 years, and they're retired now. But we had Douglas O'Shea from Illinois, and
yeah,
okay, yeah. It was a great dude, and 30 years in independence. That's definitely a big accomplishment there. So yeah,
for sure. I've been lucky in the fact that even though it's like I've done a lot of work with some high profile television companies and worked for Harley Race, and all that stuff. But I've been lucky enough to make a living even as an independent wrestler, and that's been great. So I can't complain.
Yeah, definitely. We got a couple people joining on Instagram here, so thank you guys for joining. You got Derek Stone here. Any and all questions, Derek's ready to answer. So
fire away.
Yeah. I'll start off with one here. Just talk about how you got into watching wrestling.
So I have been as long as I can remember, seriously, that I've been a wrestling fan and knew that it was something that I eventually wanted to do. I had no idea how, it was going to happen, but I grew up in Denver, and Denver was a AWA hub, just like there in Minnesota, so it's kind of nice when I actually did move up to Minnesota and talk to folks that, my heroes growing up were also their heroes. I spent so much time in the Midwest where everybody was an NWA fan, and then I was up in the Northeast where everybody was a WWF fan, that's how far back that goes, so it's just one of those things that I always knew I was going to do. Was a big fan as a young kid. My first favorite wrestler was Jerry Blackwell, because I just there was something about a big fat guy splashing people that I just loved, and I thought it was so cool. And as a little me, I thought, yeah, someday I'm going to be 400 pounds and I'm going to flatten people. I'm not quite there, so but,
yeah.
Just my earliest memories are watching the AWA on Sunday mornings. It ran here in Denver, like at 10 o'clock, I believe. So, and this was obviously way before Raw or any of that. And it's just something I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I was going to try somehow.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's always cool to hear how wrestlers get into watching wrestling, and a lot of generations of wrestling to get into. So much good stuff from back in the days. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I just it was one of those things that always kind of consumed me. I was a big fan of the AWA, like I said, and I would go and I used to remember making a trip to my local convenience store. I had a Circle K that was like maybe the only one in the city of Denver that carried wrestling magazines. So I would go down there once a month, and I would, when I could, buy wrestling magazines. And that's how I actually heard about. I mean, of course you get the WWF here too, but I didn't know anybody, from the NWA, not really, So that's how I started learning about just wrestling all over the world, and that there, and I miss those days. I miss those days of going and seeing the live action shots from different arena shows and stuff, and getting them all. And I probably still somewhere in my parents' house have a stack of old PWIs and the Wrestler and all of those magazines.
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Let me okay. And then how did you first get into training to be a wrestler or find out that you could train to do this stuff?
Yeah, well, that was the one thing is I thought, gosh, how do I had no idea. I've never met somebody that was going to be a professional wrestler. How do you do it? So I kind of had this thing in my mind. I was a real good football player. So I thought, I'm going to graduate high school. I'm going to go play college football, try my best at the NFL, and then I'm going to get into wrestling, which is a weird thing to think because, if I would have had a good NFL career, I'd have been Mongo McMichael, right? And I started wrestling when I was 40 something, right? So I didn't really know how to do it, but I started looking in the back of like wrestling magazines. This was probably like 1991. So I was just out of high school, started thinking about it. I was in college, and I really like football. I just got burned out on it wasn't as fun for me anymore, and I really didn't want to do it. I wasn't much of a student, and didn't, the only thing that I had in my mind were my two passions in life, which is wrestling and radio. Right. So I had only thought, like, how do I do this? So I started looking in the back of wrestling magazines, and back in the day, there was no internet, or, guys didn't really even have much email. So I was like writing letters to people to say, hey, I heard you have a wrestling school. I'd like to learn how to wrestle. How do I do that? Where do I go? And I'll try to make this, it's a fun story, but like I ended up getting a hold of just different wrestling schools from looking in the back. And my dad was helping me too, like looking in the back of Muscle and Fitness and Muscular Development magazine. They used to have ads in the back section where, hey, you want to try this? You want to do this? You want to, and so I just started like asking around. And one of the first people I got a hold of was Mike Shaw, who a lot of people will probably remember as Bastion Booger. Excellent wrestler, really super nice guy who has long since passed now, but he was really helpful. And he said, look for a school. I do train guys, but he was busy, so he wasn't really training it. And then that led to me reaching out to Brad Rangens, there in Minnesota. He had a school at Hamilton, and he was very, very helpful. And then I'll tell you a quick story, okay, because this is pretty interesting. I also got a hold of Charlie Fulton, who I eventually, that's who I eventually trained with. He was a former head trainer at the Monster Factory, which was, by the way, the only wrestling school I'd ever heard of was the Monster Factory, and I had seen Charlie on WWF TV, but I wasn't super familiar. But anyway, I was in college. I was in Ottawa University in Kansas, okay? A small school. And a really good friend of mine who is still a good friend of mine today, huge wrestling fan, actually goes to all the Steel Domain shows and a couple of the MAW shows and stuff. He was the sports director for our college radio station. And just one day on a whim, he said, you know what? I'm going to just send a request to WCW because I see that they're coming and they're going to do. They did a house show in Kansas City. They did a Clash of Champions in Topeka. They did a television taping in Topeka, and I think one more in Wichita. So I'm just going to send and see if they'll send any, a pair of tickets or something. Well, they ended up sending like 40 of those ugly neon Lex Luger hats, 90s style neon hats, a bunch of Lex Luger total package shirts, Sting bandanas, which I still have my Sting bandana that I got from that, the pink and the black. And then my buddy is a huge Ric Flair fan, and he got the only Four Horsemen shirt that they sent. He's like, this one's mine. Nobody else is getting it. And then they gave us a ton of tickets to all those events. So he and I we went to Memorial Hall and saw a WCW house show. And then we ended up going to a taping. My buddy Sean, the sports director, was also real good friends with my older brother who had graduated the year before. So, he was a year older than Sean. He was going to Washburn Law School, which is there in Topeka. He gave my brother and a couple of his buddies a bunch of tickets to go to the television taping, right? So, and now can I cuss on this show, because there's some cussing involved. If I can't, I can edit around it.
No, you're good. Yeah.
Okay. So my brother and his pals. Now my brother, who is deceased now, he was he on a Saturday night back in the day, by 9 o'clock, he'd have a few drinks in him for sure. And so they were out and they were enjoying this. It was like a WCW Saturday night taping. And my brother's a big wrestling fan, but he loved Ricky Steamboat. This was back when Ricky Steamboat had his feud with Rick Rude, but he was an even bigger Rick Rude fan. So every time, it was a television taping, so Steamboat came out like 3 times. Every time Steamboat came out, he was like, "Steamboat, you pussy, Rick Rude's gonna kill you," just having a real good time, not anything, whatever. And so finally, like the 3rd time that Steamboat comes out, it's for like a tag match main event. It was like him and Dustin Rhodes, I think, against, it might have been like Barry Windham and Arn Anderson, something like that, right? And so he's yelling at him, and this pretty blonde woman about 2 rows ahead of him turns around and she goes, "Why do you hate my husband so much?" And him and his friends just started laughing so hard. He's like, "Oh my God, no, I love your husband. I'm having a great time. I just love wrestling." And she was super cool. She said, "Oh, it's fine." And he said, "Hey, my younger brother really wants to be a pro wrestler. He has no idea how to get into it." And she's like, "Well, I don't really know too much, but I actually went and I met her. He went and found me and brought me up, and I talked to her. And she goes, "I don't know. Ricky could probably tell you a lot more." So she writes down on a piece of paper, "Here's the number to the gym. Call Ricky on Tuesday afternoon, and he'll tell you all about it."
Oh.
I'm blown away. Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I'll just call Ricky Steamboat, right? I'll just call him and say, "Hey, can you help me?" But sure enough, Tuesday. So that was on a Saturday night. Sunday, Monday were the 2 longest days of my life, because I could not wait to be able to call Ricky Steamboat. I called him. Sure enough, Ricky Steamboat answers the gym at their Gold's Gym that they had in Charlotte, and talked to me for a good 15 minutes. And I was real, like, I was not naive necessarily, but I just didn't know about how to go about this. And I was even asking him, and he gave me the number to Ivan Koloff's school, which is also there in Charlotte. And then I asked him about Charlie Fulton, and he had said, "Oh, Charlie's a fantastic wrestler, great trainer. You go there, you'll be really good." And I had kind of made a mental note that, and later, as I get more involved in the wrestling business, I found out how rare this was. Not one, but from being around, everybody's got a little bit of heat with somebody, right? Something. And here was a man who had no heat with anybody. Every person that I talked to said, "He's a great guy. He'll treat you right. He's a fantastic wrestler. He's a great trainer." So even guys that were his competitors, let's say, were saying his praises. And that pretty much, for the most part, kind of said, "Okay, this is where I'm going to go." Plus, he was very helpful himself. He was mailing me local newspaper copy, where I could find a place to work while I was there. I could find a place to live, all of that stuff. And I always tell people this too, I didn't realize how lucky I was. All the people that I seriously talked to about becoming a professional wrestler, if I went to any of those schools, I'd have been pretty good and I'd have been treated fair. None of them were scams. And, a lot of folks don't have that luxury. Ivan Koloff, Brad Rangans, Mike Shaw, the Monster Factory, and then Charlie, all 5 would have done me just fine. So I got pretty lucky there.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, it's always always cool to hear stories about how people got started, and then you got you with a lot of the legends, so that's a double plus right there. So
yeah, it was really cool, and everybody was so nice to me. I'm a pretty nice person, pretty easy to get along with, but I've been lucky. Nobody's ever really big time to me.
Oh,
And I think maybe it's just, I'm just genuine. I come across and say, "I'm just going to ask you a question, and if you don't know the answer, you don't have to tell me. I'm not going to, whatever."
yeah.
So it worked out pretty well. So I started training basically like at the very end of 1992 into 93, and got started, and I just loved it. it was one of those things. I was kind of floundering before I started wrestling. I hated school. I was just getting in trouble, drinking, partying, just having a good time as a 19-year-old kid, you know.
Oh
And
yeah.
then as soon as I got into wrestling, it was like, oh, this is what I'm going to focus on for the rest of my life. And pretty much that's how it's gone, you know.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And then yeah, 90 or you started training in the beginning of 92 or midway or
A bit, kind of at the end of 92, beginning of 93 is
okay.
when I
Yeah.
really started, got real serious, you know. And I had to move move everything. I was living in Kansas before that. So I had to move everything to Ohio and all
Oh,
of that and then get started, you know.
yeah. Yeah, definitely. Who were some of your early matches or when did you have these early matches?
So my very first match, like I just took to training and I was trying to train 5 days a week. So I actually had my first match at about 4 months and it was a WWF television match. So my first match was a job match against a man named Crush, if you remember Crush.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that was my first match. And I think my second match was, uh, gosh, it might have been like somebody like Reno Reigns. I think I
Okay.
had a dark match there in that same set of tapings. And I think
Mhm.
that's who the second, it was somewhere in that early part. But for the most part, my first 6 to 8 months, that's what I was doing, just WWF TV and then occasional local shows. But even back in the day, local shows were, it's different than things are now, you know.
Yeah.
So you'd
Yeah.
go to a local show that had 500 people and the promoter would be upset. He'd say, man, we didn't draw anybody. There was
Oh.
nobody here, you know. And I'm not trying to say like, oh, things were way better. It was just different. You know what I mean? There wasn't like, there were limited things on television. There were limited shows that were out there. So like
Mhm.
you could expect to get bigger crowds because they weren't going to shows every month, you know, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? I mean,
Yeah.
maybe some areas were, but where I was in Ohio, Pennsylvania, the bottom part of New York, no, that wasn't happening, you know?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, yeah, 500 in a draw of like the Midwest here, like a steel or MAW show, like that'd be a big number and a
Yeah,
couple of them
absolutely.
like 1,000. So like, yeah.
Absolutely. But then there's, the guys these days have different sources of revenue. You might get some subscribers to your YouTube channel, things like that. So there are other ways. So, I don't ever mean to come across of like, as like, oh, old times were better. They were just different. Things were different. You did things
Oh,
a little bit of a different way. So, you know,
mhm.
but then from there I got pretty lucky that I ended up meeting up with Bill Eadie, who was Demolition Axe. He was running some local shows like that, and I was lucky that I was the young guy. I was the only person on the card that nobody knew. You know,
Oh,
uh, so I was working with. I worked with the Honky Tonk Man. I'd worked with Greg Valentine. I worked with, Nunzio before he was Nunzio. He was, whatever. But it was like stuff, guys like that. Coco Beware. And back in the day, it was kind of like those guys were kind of just coming off of their WWF run, right? And so they were still pretty fresh off of TV. So they still had that buzz, So you went to go see a show with Greg Valentine, King Kong Bundy, Honky Tonk Man, Coco Beware, Lanny Poffo or whatever. That was
oh,
like seeing a WWF B team show. You know what I mean? So people were still going.
yeah, yeah.
And I got to be like the guy, like I trained in a pretty old school style. So all those guys loved working with me because I
Oh,
was easy to work. I was easy to work with right from the start.
mhm. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, you did some WWF work, but I didn't realize you were like really just thrown into it, like first match, dark.
First match. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, like I
yeah.
said, it was different. And I think I told this before. I got lucky in the fact that the man that I trained with, Charlie Fulton, he didn't have a promotion. Okay. So he
Oh,
wasn't, he made his money off of
mhm,
sending guys to do jobs for the WWF, and of course what we paid him to train, right? But
mhm.
he wasn't trying to run a show. He never ran shows. He didn't do that. He'd help us get bookings if we needed somewhere. But I didn't realize it for about a year. I got my payday and it was X amount of dollars. I didn't realize that he got the other half of that money.
Oh,
And
yeah,
and the agent that booked us got like $50 on top of that. So all the money that I was making, I was splitting it up, and I had no idea until like he said, "Oh yeah, by the way, this is how it goes." I think I found out because I still owed him a couple of bucks, and he was like,
Oh,
"Oh, don't worry about it. I made money off of you." And I was like, "Oh, okay." I had no idea. I thought, it was the most money I'd ever been paid, so I thought, "Oh, it worked out pretty well." And then
yeah.
when I like a couple years, 3 years later or so, when I was getting myself booked, or they were just calling me directly, and then
Oh,
I noticed, oh, my payday is twice as much as it used to be. Why? Oh, because nobody's taking a cut from it. That's why I get it all. So it was
yeah.
a kind of a fun, all above board. I just was a kid who didn't realize that's how business worked.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, you get a certain amount of money. You're like, oh, I've never done this before. So
Right,
this,
exactly. I didn't know what to expect. Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, it's like I don't know, first job when you're like a teenager. I'm like, oh shoot, I got money. So
Oh my God, I'm making $8 an hour. Holy
eight
cow. Right.
dollars,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm rich now. So
Yeah. Exactly.
mm, oh man, yeah, yeah, yeah. I believe it was around the same time, but we also had someone else on the show that did some jobber work in the late '90s. I believe it was Tom Rocky Stone. He kind of had the same story. So
Yeah, for
oh yeah,
sure. For sure. Yeah.
oh, yeah,
I've
yeah.
seen
He
him,
was a great
and I have nothing, but I liked the fact that I did a lot of TV stuff, but then like there eventually, after doing TV stuff for a couple years, they
guy.
took me off TV. So every time they called me, I did a dark match, you know,
Oh,
and I loved it. So it was super fun.
mhm. Yeah, yeah. What's a favorite Charlie Fulton match that you or actually favorite Charlie Fulton memory that you have?
Oh geez. Well, it was one that sticks out the most was and this is where I learned a lot from. He was just, first of all, he was a real quiet guy. He'd be the first to tell you he didn't have that it factor, but his in-ring work was as good as anybody. And that's not just coming from me. That's coming from guys like Ricky Steamboat. That's coming from your Andersons. You're talking guy. This guy knew what the hell he was doing, right? Really good. So I think I was going to run a show or help another guy run a show in Marion, which is where the school was, Marion, Ohio, and we decided we would have him be the special guest referee for the main event. Well, the guy who was renting us the ring decided to screw us over and not show up with the ring.
Mm.
So, and this goes to show you the quality of the guys that were used. And they were all students or former students who had just been, out for a year or two. So,
Yeah.
well, we gotta do this show, right? So we did a show on wrestling mats, and it was really good. We sold this armory out, so we were not going to turn people away. My mistake is that we booked it where I was the quote hometown babyface, right? So I was going to beat the guy that was their champ, right? So
Yeah.
right, really, really good match. People were really in it. We gave everybody the option to get their money back and go because we didn't have the ring.
Mm.
Nobody said no. They all watched. So, and we're talking probably the army was full, so it was probably 400 people. Um,
Mm.
and we worked the match, and I go over 1, 2, 3, raise my hand, and I go to get the belt, and he's like, "I'm not giving you the belt because you didn't win it in the ring," and it made sense, right?
Oh,
So me
yeah.
as the baby face and the kid, I didn't know what to say, so I
Mm.
like kind of started like, "I can't believe you, this and that. Like, why would you do that?" And blah blah blah. And he gets to the back, and he's just kind of reading me the riot act. He's like, people are coming in, they're like, "Screw you, Charlie, whatever," right? And he looks at me and he goes, "Do you know what you did wrong?" And
Mm.
then he's like, "You just put all the heat on me. Like, you should have just said, hey, I'll get you next time or whatever." So like everything that he taught me was a thing where like he there's always a lesson in something. And
Mm.
that one sticks out. There's probably more if I sat and thought about it a lot, but that one always comes to mind where like that was the first like lesson that I learned. And I'd only been in the business 8 or 9 months, at that
Mm.
point. And I was still I'd only started working matches 4 months before that, right? So I was
Yeah.
kind of naive, but he was always a good guy. And then he was like, and I was like, oh man, what do you want? I said, do you want me to go and make a statement out there again and talk to the people again? He goes, nah, it's fine. Don't, but just recognize what you did and learn from it so that kind of stuff never happens, you know? So just
Mhm.
a real solid guy, real solid guy.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Looking through Instagram here, got Tom Burdick from Wrestling Gone Wild says hi guys. So
How's it
shout out
going,
to
man? Thanks for tuning in.
yeah. And oh, we got from MAW and also the Florida areas, the Real Drago says good evening guys. So
Hey, how's
yeah.
it going, man? That's an impressive looking guy right there, the real Drago.
Yeah.
He looks mean, doesn't he? I
Yeah,
know who
he's
that is.
a
Yeah,
scary dude. So
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I know he's at I mean a lot of great MAW matches and went one on one with was a 20-year veteran Moses Mayhem, who's a big
Oh,
dude. So
awesome.
big
Yeah,
dude
yeah,
colliding.
cool.
So
I really like, I know that you've been to several of their shows. I really liked my time working for those guys, and it's always worked out well. Those cards are always stacked. I had a great time working for those. I think the last time I was there was I wrestled Garrison Creed, and we had a great, hard hitting, fun match. And they do a great job of promoting. I think they're really every one of their shows is like, God, well, I can't miss this one. You know, it's cool.
yeah. Yeah, they're promoting stuff left or promoting stuff left and right, and they just promoted or a show for March that has ODB. I'm like, okay, you
Yeah,
got
yeah,
more
isn't that
guys.
cool? It's cool, like,
Mhm.
and I like that too. I mean, as somebody who has I'm a I'm a big fan of just every type of wrestling, right? And I know that there are other people out there. I mean, I think that you see the mistake that a lot of folks will make is that they only book what they like, not necessarily book what like everybody would like. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
hey, I would love to go see a show that had ODB and Too Cold Scorpio and Jerry Lawler and some luchadors. You know what I mean? Like to me, that's a fun show. That's
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, definitely. And also on Facebook here we got All Out Pro Wrestling owner Pete King says, "Do you remember the Pillars of Power Jim Gagnon?"
Oh boy, it sounds really, really familiar. If I sat and thought about it, yes. So the name, yes, absolutely sounds familiar. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's so a lot of wrestling and remember is so much to just pick out certain points of it. So
Yeah,
yeah.
for sure. I've been taking bumps for 30 years too, so stuff doesn't come to
Oh,
me
yeah.
as fast as it used to.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's true. Oh man. Um uh oh yeah, what was the first independent wrestling promotion you ever worked for?
Well, gosh, I don't know the name of it, but it was for Bill Eadie,
Oh,
Demolition
oh,
Axe. So that it was for him. And then I think the next was I worked for, you might not remember, I think it was called IWA in India,
oh,
the Indiana Wrestling Association or Indiana Wrestling Council. I worked for Mike Samples. If you remember Mike Samples uh, from Memphis, he was a big USWA guy back in the day, and he did kind of like a principal gimmick, big dude, tough guy. He ran in Indianapolis, and I'm happy because that was like the first booking that I got on my own. I'd had some matches and had filmed a bunch of things, and I made my own demo tape and I sent it to him and I said, I know you guys are running every Friday night. I'd love to come in. And Indianapolis was only like 2.5 hours from where I lived. So that was my first gig of every Friday night. I think I got that like 7 months into the business, 7 or 8 months. So where I got lucky, working every Friday night somewhere, for a while.
mhm. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Those I would say those are probably the two. And I did some stuff in Cleveland for a guy named JT Lightning, who is long since passed. Some folks might remember him. But to be honest, I don't remember the name of those organizations.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, there's a lot of them. So yeah, yeah. And young, I mean, I know I'm young too, but also young people out there, yeah, people had to send in tapes to get noticed, not social media. So
It's a way different time. Look, all the hours, and I can remember like using wrestling money to buy a video camera that I could also do editing on, and the editing was so basic. It was just, I could play a match, but I could type across, Derek Stone versus whoever, and then the date there, so like it was pretty basic. And I got lucky. My ex-wife, who was still like one of my best friends in the entire world, she worked at a cable company, and she went out and she, like, when they would do the reels that they had, they would sometimes play those on VHS tapes. Well, after those tapes had been used a couple times, they didn't use them, so they'd erase them. And these were tapes that weren't the full VHS tapes. They had, like, you could put 15 minutes of content on them, and that's it. And that was perfect for like a rest. So I got a bunch of those for free, and I thought that, well, this is fantastic. You don't think about the expense. I mean, that was just a part of learning the business. I learned how to expense all those things and learn how to say, okay, well, I need to spend. I found a guy that can do me 500 8x10s for $75, and then every tape that I send out somewhere, I had to really make sure that I was talking to somebody that I think was going to pan out, because I was spending a couple of, $5 to $10 every time I sent out a tape. So,
oh,
and that's it. So guys today have it way better to be able to have a link where people can just go to. You can send it in an email and say, here's everything I've done for the last 6 months. If you want to see it, I think it's great. I wish I could have done that.
yeah. And here's my YouTube channel. Check out all my matches here. We got that.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I don't miss those days of and I still have probably a couple of copies of those tapes too. And it was like, and you had to experiment. What does a guy really want to see? Does he want to see a full match? Does he want to see, what does he want to see from me? Does he want to see a highlight reel? Because if he wants to see a highlight reel, I'm going to have somebody else do it for me because I can't do it.
oh,
That kind of, so,
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, highlight reels and like movie videos or like Titantrons and stuff. That's definitely
right.
requires a lot of work. So yeah.
For a while when I was helping Harley race a book and doing some stuff for different folks, I always used to talk to people like, what do you want to do when you look for tapes? Like, I don't want to see highlight reels. I would rather see somebody. One thing that's kind of cool these days is if somebody will send you a match, right? I'll always go and look them up on YouTube, and I'll say, I want to see the match you didn't send me. I want to see the one that didn't make the cut, because maybe that's more representative of your of who
Oh,
you really are. You know what I mean?
mhm.
Everybody should send a match when you're with somebody who's also really good, but I want to
Oh,
see you work with somebody who's really bad. That'll show me how good you are. You know?
yeah. Yeah. It's working the crowd and working the wrestler and all that. So
Yeah, I had to change spots. By the way, my phone was dying, so I had to hook it up
oh,
to the charger here. So that's why you've got a different view here.
okay. Yeah. You're all good. So I wish I could do that, but I'm in a basement, so I don't
You're
have
stuck right
any
there.
outlets. So I hope I got enough battery, but yeah, I'm hoping should last. So
Good deal.
yeah. Yeah. Let me see. Oh yeah. Real Drago says, I would like to work with Derek. It would be awesome. So
I
I
think it'd be
think,
great. I think talk to MAW for sure. I'd love to do it. I think it'd be a really good match, man. I think it'd be a lot of fun. So I'm all for it.
oh yeah, definitely. Let me see what I got here. Oh yeah, you did some work, or are still doing work with Metro Pro Wrestling. How did you get started with that?
Well, Metro, they aren't running anymore. Metro in Kansas
They are.
City. Yeah.
Okay.
I just, I had been in the area. I had moved back to Kansas, and this is 96, 97, something like that. And my ex-wife, who I mentioned earlier, she was from there. At the time, she had a very young sister. She's 18 years older than her sister. And she said, look, you're at the point of your career where you can move around, and we don't need to be in one spot. Things were going pretty well. She goes, I'd like to be around my little sister while she's growing up. So we moved to Lawrence, Kansas, and worked for a couple of the local stuff there while I was still doing doing dark matches and traveling quite a bit. And then it just ended up running into a guy, the promoter there, who worked for. It's called Metro. It was called Metro Pro Wrestling because he worked for Metro Sports, which was a local sports channel. So they needed content. So he started up a wrestling show, and I worked for them, for quite a while till he quit running Metro, started running this a bigger company called the NWL. They found a guy with millions of dollars, and they promptly lost millions of dollars. And then now he runs a winery. So I haven't worked for him in quite a while. But I still love Kansas City. I spent tons of time there in the Kansas area. I worked for some guys named Trailblazer there. And of course, WLW, which was Harley Race's organization, who I spent a ton of time there. I was his head trainer for years and years there. I still work for those guys too. I'm lucky that I'm at the point in my career now that I really only work for people that I really like. So, and that have treated me very well. So folks like Steel Domain, I love Ed Hellier. He's a great promoter and a really great guy. I love Derek Martin, who runs River City Championship Wrestling over in La Crosse.
Yeah.
Fantastic guys. I mean, just salt of the earth, all of them. MAW, those guys are terrific. Like I'd mentioned before, still working for Leland Race in, WLW. So, and of course I've spent a ton of time out here in Denver working for Rocky Mountain Pro. So these are all people that I've known for years and years who, I don't want any hassle. I don't want to have to fight for my money. Not that that happens all the time, but it does. I absolutely 100% know that the people that I work for now, none of them are ever going to do that. They're going to make sure things are good for me. Travel's good for me. I can come and go as I want to, so yeah, it's all good.
Yeah, definitely.
And I will say this, when I moved to Minnesota and I was working in radio there, and I'd kind of like just not really the last 2 years or so, I have been super busy, well over 100, 120 matches. I would have had probably close to 150 this year, but I took the last 2 months off because of this injury, so I had to cancel quite a few. But the folks over there, like Steel Domain Wrestling, River City Championship Wrestling, MAW, it really kind of reinvigorated my passion for wrestling, because it was nice to be around, just involved in a whole different wrestling scene. And there's so much good talent in Minnesota, Wisconsin, that whole area. I haven't seen a bad show that I've been on or around. I mean, I'm sure maybe there are some, but I have not seen any. Everybody that I've seen is like, oh, these guys all know what they're doing. These shows are good. If you're not going to these shows, I don't know why you're not going to them. They're fun,
Yeah. I don't think I've really seen bad shows. I might have seen bad matches, but like
sometimes that'll happen, right? Yeah, but not an entire show that you're like, man, this is killing wrestling, right? That doesn't happen. Hasn't happened, yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes it's a little weird, like how things happen, but I'm like, it's never really been bad or not entertaining. So
for sure.
Yeah. And of course, Steel Domain Wrestling. I started watching them. Pretty much my first ever promotion about 5 years ago, and they've come so far. And after, it's done a lot of work. And I think around that, I think last year when I after COVID, it kind of changed. A lot of new people were coming in, and that's where I saw you doing some work.
Yeah, definitely. I like how they do their stuff, because they run their normal show at this same armory there in Minneapolis, but in the summer when they're doing those fair shows, it's when he would kind of experiment and bring in some different talent. And that's how I had reached out to him. I said, and I had known Ed for a long time because he was friends with other friends of mine and folks like Adam Pierce, who had worked there for years. I've known Adam for 25 plus years, long, maybe, right around there at least, and Ace Steel and guys like that who had been there for forever. So I just reached out to him. I said, hey, I'm in the area. I'd really love to work for you. And he's like, yeah, I do these fair shows during the summer, so come on, and then I made his regular roster, and just loved it. It's been great. I like that, how he does that,
Yeah. No, like my favorite summer fair event is always the Panaprog days. That's always been a really memorable one to
for sure.
Yeah.
Those
And
are always fun. I like, a lot of folks don't like doing fair shows or, that kind of, I always like them. I like doing shows with that aren't your typical wrestling fan shows necessarily. You know what I mean? Like where there's a wide variety of folks that are going to come and check it out. And, maybe it can convert wrestling fans to say, you know what, I would have never thought about going to a indie pro wrestling show or a pro
yeah,
wrestling show period, but I actually saw one and I loved it, and so now I'm going. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that over the years from different folks.
oh yeah, 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 definitely. Yeah, no, like some of the fair shows, it's usually like, yeah, definitely not a typical crowd, but some do really draw numbers, and they're like, oh, what is that? There's a ring over there. Is
What
wrestling?
is going
What is
on
that?
exactly? Yeah, for
I
sure.
thought this is a fair, but I guess we got wrestling. I don't know. So
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, definitely cool stuff. So and yeah, Panaprog drew so many people.
so
I've been there, but
many.
also seen like up high pictures like that's a lot of people. So
Packed, right? Yeah, it's packed.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, oh yeah, I guess 5 letter word people don't necessarily like to hear anymore, but how did you do with COVID in 2020 with wrestling shutting down and everything?
Yeah, it was tough. I really just kind of did what a lot of folks did, is cut the bookings way back. I did have a couple of places that were running. Like in Missouri, there were some folks that I worked for who were like, "Well, as long as you're vaccinated and you have this, and
Oh,
then we're good to go." I had a good friend of mine who you might know as Niles Planquet.
oh,
He
oh yeah.
he I've known him for, geez, I've known him a long time. I was the best man in his wedding. I've known, and he has a winery, legit has a winery, and he was running shows out of his winery where he was just filming those. It was called Viral Pro, and
Oh,
so I had kind of taken a step back, but I was also uh, trying to stay as active as I could. But I think just like everybody else, you know,
mhm.
you you could get what you want. But when it opened up, it was like all of a sudden, holy cow, I had more than I could handle. It was kind of
Oh yeah,
nice. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I know. Yeah, since after COVID, Steal the Main changing, I got to meet Niles Plunky and know what all he's about and the winery coming
Yeah.
out and everything. So
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. But yeah, I think yeah, literally 2020 for the COVID year, I went to one entire show in the entire 365 days of the year. I was like, oh
Hey, you know
wow.
what? I didn't go to too many more than that. I think I
Yeah,
probably went to 10.
yeah.
So if that, if maybe not even that many. Yeah. So I did get lucky though. But I had a good friend of mine who I took just a regular job there for a little while. He
Oh,
worked for the county, and so I was paving roads for a while, and I was an essential worker. So I just used all that time and saved up a ton of money because I was, and paid
yeah.
off all my debt and took the
Oh, wow.
bookings when I could take them. And then after about a year of that job, I was like, you know what? I hate this. So I'm going to go back to just wrestling full time. And that's what I did.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, oh yeah, speaking of Steel Domain Wrestling again, last year I believe it was around March, you first won the SDW Northern States Championship.
Yeah.
Talk about a little bit of that.
Oh, that was a lot of fun. That was in a series of matches with Garrison Creed.
Mhm.
And I really enjoyed working with him. He's got that kind of rough and tumble style like I like.
Oh
And
yeah.
we had a series of 3 or 4 matches, and then that particular match I think was a lot of fun, and I think we gelled pretty well together. Um, and I was surprised that I had gotten the opportunity to wrestle for that belt. I've known a lot of people who'd had it before me, and that was pretty cool. So we had a really solid match, and we were going to have a return match
Hmm.
after I think I could be wrong here, but I think something happened and he got hurt. And
Oh,
then by the time he came back, they pushed him into the feud with Niles, and then he won the main title there. or
Yeah.
I might be wrong. I'm probably wrong, but I know that he is now. He was, until Miles just beat him recently. He was the main champion, but that's how I ended up getting on. And of course, the last time I was at Steel Domain, I lost that Northern States title to
Yeah.
Pro, who, you know, just to say that guy's great. He's so much. I think he's really talented. And if you get a chance to go see him, go see him. He's a lot of fun.
Oh yeah. 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 I've been seeing, probably saw one of Kyle's first matches 5 years ago, and getting a lot better and getting a lot of bookings in the cities. And I think he's been to Canada a few times. So
Yeah, for sure,
yeah.
for sure. He's been real active, and you know, there's promoters out there that are watching this, or guys that, you know, from different areas. If you haven't seen him, you go check him out and book him, because he's a great person, and he's also a very talented wrestler, you know, and somebody that people can get behind. By the way, I am not your typical wrestling shoot interview. I never have anything bad to say about anybody. I really
Oh,
don't. That's just how I am. You know, I'm the character and who I am in the ring is that's
oh
a
yeah.
different guy. You know, when I'm here, I don't have anything, but, you know, I can't live my life being super negative. So I'm just not ever, you know.
Yeah.
So I always try to tell people that, look, if you want me to do a shoot interview, it's going to be a shoot interview of me saying nice things about people, because that's really what I do.
Yeah. 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 I mean, you see so many like these WWE interviews. It's like, this guy sucked. I'm like, it's
Right.
wrestling.
Right. Exactly.
It's still,
Exactly.
so, yeah. Yeah. And yeah, we had a show earlier tonight, and she usually plays a heel wrestler. I'm like, I've never really met her too much in person. I wonder how she's gonna be as a person, and then it's
Yeah.
turned out to be a regular person. So
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
You know, that's the thing about wrestling, is like, look, I can't be that guy all the time. I'd have a hard time, you know.
Yeah.
First, it would kill my voice, for one. I can't growl at people all the time, right? So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's just, you know, you just turn it up when it's time to turn it up, you know.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Someone else who had I thought he kind of sounded like the same all the time was Devlin Kane, who kind of resembles you. He's got the beard and
Yeah, love that
stuff.
guy. I love that
Yeah.
guy. Yeah, we had some really fun matches, as a matter of fact. I love the Viking. Again, what's the name of their tag team? I like those guys so much. They're both so good.
Yeah. Oh man.
I wish I could. I can't remember the name, but you know, Christoph is his partner, but I can't remember the name of the team. Valhalla Rising, maybe,
Oh I think sounds about right. I remember the
something like that.
ball
Yeah,
word. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I just assumed like when we talk after shows, he was to be like, "Oh, how's it going?" I don't know. So, yeah,
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 yeah.
wrestlers. So, yeah. Yeah, actually, I got to see you guys work. It was my first ever Discover Pro Wrestling show earlier in March this year. So,
Oh, yeah. Okay.
yeah, I was like two big guys and two veterans going at it. Can't get better than that. So,
Yeah, that was fun. That Duluth is cold all the time.
yeah, yeah, I've been there a few times. It gets pretty cold. So,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. It was I actually drove with a buddy from Moorhead, so it was about like 4.5 hours. So I'm like,
yeah.
it was a good show, and yeah, definitely Eric definitely a great guy, and definitely knows who to hire for his show. So yeah.
Well, hopefully he'll run some more. I think that he you know, that's the thing about stuff sometimes, is that, like, if you really want to try to do things right, you know, you can't just slap a coat of paint on it and just do it. You know, sometimes you want to make sure that you got all your, you know, the I's dotted and T's crossed and all that. So hopefully, you know, the fans up there in Duluth, they hadn't seen anything for a while. So hopefully that can be a more regular thing, more than just once a year. So, you know, it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I didn't realize, like, I've never heard of it. I was trying to look it up. I'm like, oh, they've done one show, but I guess it's a special one time a year thing for that area. So
Yeah, for sure.
I know they're usually a North Dakota company, but Below Zero Wrestling did a show in Duluth a little bit ago, so they were able to get some more wrestling over there. So
Oh,
yeah.
good. That's good. You know, it's fun to see towns that used to be hotbeds, or that, you know, just haven't had wrestling for a while for whatever reason. You know, to see it start coming back, because, you know, there's wrestling fans all over the world. You know, And
Oh,
it's nice to be able to go to see something that you haven't, it hasn't been around for a while.
yeah. Yeah, definitely.
You're a guy that's like from a big city and there's plenty of smaller promotions around. You get spoiled sometimes. You
Oh
think,
yeah.
I missed it this month. I'll go to these other guys next month or whatever. Look, if you haven't seen one in 5 years, you're gonna go. So hopefully that happens more often.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, if yeah, pretty much for the Minneapolis area, there's like 9 different promotions,
Yeah,
everything every week. I'm like, oh,
right.
we're gonna go through this week. So
For sure,
yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, Minneapolis is definitely the place to be. It's a lot of stuff within like half an hour or like a couple hours away. There's so
For
much going
sure,
on over here. So
for sure.
yeah, yeah.
I have the similar conversation with a lot of the younger guys and girls in Denver. There's about 4 or 5 different promotions here in like the Denver metro area, and I was like, when I first started, I would have killed to be able to drive a half an hour to somewhere. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah.
Instead of my closest trip was 3.5 hours, right? So,
Oh
just
yeah.
be thankful for it. And yeah, you get spoiled sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Um, oh yeah, I threw in a couple random questions in here just to see who Derek Stone is, the person, and what he likes to do. But what is your favorite food?
My favorite food, oh my gosh, it's probably a toss up between Mexican food and Italian food, probably. I
Okay.
mean, carbs, right? Extra carbs.
Oh yeah.
I would
Yeah.
say that Chinese is not far behind, though. I'll give you that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, definitely Chinese going to buffets and stuff. They always have
Yeah.
good things. So yeah, yeah. Let me see. Yeah, if anybody in the comments or anything, if you got any questions, we got Derek Stone here for a little bit more. So yeah. Uh, oh yeah. I know you told a couple stories already, but what's another good wrestling story that you have?
Oh, let's see. What do you mean by good? What do you want?
Oh, wait. Any good road stories or traveling or
Yeah, I got a couple. I'll tell you. This is a story, and it'll sound like I'm name dropping, but it's just the one that just
oh,
popped into my head. Okay, so when I
okay.
was working for Harley Race, he was when he first started his promotion and took over, and he was running a lot of shows. He was doing like 3 shows a week in their small Missouri towns. And I was his champ for a while. And Harley was a big, you know, Harley liked to drink, liked to have a good time. So we would almost always, once the ring was down and guys were ready to head to a next town, we would stop somewhere and get some drinks and get something to eat, like, if the places were still open. And most of the time, because Harley Race was a god in the Midwest, right? So if Harley Race was going to run a show in this small town and said, hey, I know you guys close at 9, but our wrestling show won't be over till 9:30. We won't be able to be here till 11. Can you stay open? Everybody did. It was
Oh
nice.
yeah.
So I was good friends with Harley. Harley and I always got along really, really well, even though we're very different people. We had a lot of respect for each other, and he always had respect for me, which he maybe didn't have to have, but he always treated me really well, and I was always upfront with him. So we were
Oh,
just sitting there talking, and on this particular show, he had Abdullah the Butcher in with him. And I had met him several times before, and I really liked him. He was a good guy to talk to, and he always talked business, had the big cigar in his mouth and everything. And
uh,
one of Harley's first students that I had a hand in training was Trevor Murdoch, the former NWA champion, WWF guy. This is back when he was known as Trevor Rhodes. Okay,
oh,
had the blonde hair, looked very much like Dustin Rhodes.
oh
Um,
yeah.
I mean, this is a long time ago. And we're in this diner, and I'm sitting next to Harley and Harley's wife, BJ, who has passed on as well. And Trevor is on the other side of um, Abdullah the Butcher. And Abdullah just looks at him,
Hmm.
and he looks at Trevor Murdoch, and he slaps him across the face,
Oh,
like hard.
oh,
And Trevor, who is a no nonsense guy, even when he was a young kid, was like, doesn't put up with bullshit, right? He just looks, and he has this dumbfounded look on his face, like, and he looks at me, and I'm just laughing, I'm laughing hard, because I'd had a few in me, but I was also like, it was just really funny. No reason. Trevor didn't say, and then he looks at him again, and he does it again. He slaps him real hard across the face, leaning across the table, and does it. And Trevor's like, I'm just sitting here. Abdullah the Butcher just slapped me in the face twice, and Harley's like looking at him like, well, what are you gonna do? Like, you're gonna punch him back? You're gonna whatever? And Trevor's like, I don't want to get in a fight with Abdullah the Butcher right here in a diner in some small town in Missouri, And he's like, and he goes, what would you do? And I go, well, I'd punch him. And because I'm trying to rib him, I'm like, I want to see where this is going to go, because Trevor was going to listen to me anyway. And so he goes, he said something like, sir, I don't appreciate you slapping me, and if we need to settle it, we can settle it. And Abdullah just looks at him again, and he just starts laughing, and he's like laughing and smoking his cigarette, and then they just keep drinking, and Trevor's like, oh, I guess I passed the test, and I was like, everything's okay. And then about 10 minutes later, we're getting ready to all leave, and Harley and Abdullah the Butcher are locked up, rolling around on top of everybody's cars.
Oh.
Now, keep in mind, Harley Race is in his late 60s at this point, probably early 70s maybe, and Abdullah about the same. And Harley's wife is getting a little concerned, and she's like, are you going to break it up? And I said, I'm not breaking it up. I'm going to let us see how this plays out, And so I just watched him, I don't know why that just popped into my head. Probably because I was talking to Leland Race earlier today. So Harley stuff.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Is on my mind right now, I think. That was fun. There's sometimes I have to have people sit and talk with me, and I'll start remembering just stories off the cuff, like, I hadn't thought about this in years, So that was always fun. It was always fun being around Harley Race. He was always a guy that was, you went anywhere you went with Harley, he was the main event. You know what I mean? He's the main, and everybody stopped and took notice, and did a lot for you if you were seen with him, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll tell you another real quick story that just popped in my head. So my very first match that I talked about earlier in the day, right now, I'm not a small man. I was in much better shape when I first started wrestling. I was probably 25 pounds or so. I'm like 280 now, but I was pretty ripped up and not small, but this was back in the era of giants, right? In the WWF, right? So I walk in, and we're doing a television taping, and the first person I literally bumped right into him was Crush, who I ended up wrestling later on that night. 6'7", 320, 30 pounds, whatever, right? So I was, excuse me, hey, whatever. Walk right by him, and the same next person in the hallway that I literally bumped into again was The Undertaker, 6'10", 300, whatever, right? And they finally get into the locker room. I look to my right, who's sitting on the couch? The Giant Gonzalez, 7'7", 450 pounds or whatever. I look to the other side, and on a couch, my childhood hero, Sergeant Slaughter, who, if you've ever seen Sergeant Slaughter, he looks like an oil barrel with a t-shirt on. I mean, he's a big giant man. And here I am, I'm 6'1", 225 pounds, and I feel like a small child, And I look at my buddy Billy, who was also on the tapings with me, and I said, man, what the hell are we doing here? Like, why am I here? Like, thank God the next person I ran into was like Jim Brunzell or somebody. I was like, oh, okay, I'm not the smallest person here, right? So that was my first introduction to pro wrestling, like a pro wrestling locker room. Oh my God, everybody here is a giant. I'm a tiny little man that shouldn't be here.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, what were locker rooms like? Like, what did you do with these guys or talk about?
So when I first started out, I did get a lot of benefit of the doubt because of who I was trained by. So Charlie had a very good reputation. So if
Right.
you were known as a guy that was a Charlie Fulton guy, people were pretty cool to you, you know. But back when I was doing jobs and first started, everybody shared the same locker room with the exception of like Hogan and Savage, let's say. But you know, I dressed right next to Bret Hart. I dressed, you know, in the same locker room with everybody, and they'd talk. And most of the guys were really, really cool. They'd say, hey, oh, so where are you from? You from here? You know, you from Ohio, or whatever. And you know, I remember one time I had ended up talking to like I had heard Jerry Lawler on a radio interview, so he was just happened to be back in the locker room. He said, "Hey, how you guys doing? Whatever." And I said, "Oh yeah, I heard you on the so and so show today." And he started talking to me about that. You know, people were real friendly. You know, as long as you weren't like acting like a big idiot and you know trying to get pictures or just being a pain. You know, and
Oh.
you did your job. You know,
Mhm.
so that's why I think it's interesting now that it's so different that guys are in a completely different area. They you know, all your enhancement guys are somewhere else, and everybody else is in a different locker room. It really wasn't like that, and everybody was real cool. You know,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
you'd
Yeah, definitely.
almost always somebody would sit right next to you and talk to you about, hey, so what's going, you know, you're from here, what's going on in this town? What's, you know, or if something happened at, you know, when I was in Kansas City and there was big news in Kansas City that made national news, they'd say, hey, what's the deal with this? You know, guys are real friendly. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Did you ever get the chance to be with The Rock or anything, or was he a little after?
So he was on a couple of well, yeah, several tapings that I was on. I remember one of the first my first impression of him was when
Mhm.
he was Rocky Maivia. Like he had just started,
Oh,
and
wow.
he was like leaning over a table, and his triceps were the biggest triceps I'd ever seen in my life. Like they just stood out. He was kind of half had his arm, and this is, you know, he was just big. He still had that big football player build, not as cut up as he is now, you know.
Oh,
But
yeah.
he was a big dude. I was like, holy cow, that's a tricep right there. That's a big boy, you know. Um,
Mhm.
and then later, I did a job for the Nation of Domination, and um, he had just broken up from them and had sort of became the Rock at that point. So yeah, I was around him a lot, but he was always real nice. You know, like I said, I don't have any negative memory. I've one negative memory. You want to hear it?
Yeah, if you're willing to.
If you got time, if
Yeah.
you got time. Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah, we got time.
I was doing a job for Doink, and this was Ray Apollo or Phil Apollo, I can't even remember, but he was with Doink and Dink, and he was the baby face, and he was a real jerk, really. So that's about as bad as I'll say about somebody. He wasn't real nice, and I think it was because he was a job guy for a long time, and then now when he gets his opportunity to be somebody, he was a jerk to a lot of jobbers. So
Mhm.
I had been there a ton, and I mean I was at this point I was probably there once a month for a while, you know. So I'd do 2 days a month for those guys, maybe even more that during this particular stretch. And
Mhm.
I was real. People liked me, you know. He did his whoopee cushion finish, you know, the big splash, right? Well,
Oh, yeah.
he'd had a habit of coming down real heavy on guys, you know,
Oh,
like not landing on both feet. And so when he did it to me, yeah, his right leg just he barely hit his heel on that one, and
oh,
slid and landed on me real hard. You know, didn't break anything, but it was a very uncomfortable and it hurt. And
yeah.
so he 1 2 3, he gets out. The referee comes over right away. Hey, you all right, man? You know, you need help. And I was fine. And
Mhm.
when I get back, like I'm selling. Oh wait, it was a shoot. I just it hurt, you know. And I get back, and the agents there was like Rene Goulet, Tony Gurria, and um, Jay Strongbow, and God, somebody else I can't remember right offhand. I'll think of it. Um,
Mhm.
were chewing his ass. Like, what the? We've told you about this. What are you doing? Like, that's,
Mhm.
you know, that's a bunch of BS. And you know, a couple of the boys were like giving him the stink eye, like,
Mhm.
again, like again, really. And
Mhm.
uh, you know, and a couple of the other job guys that were there were like, "Hey man, are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine." And so they come up to me. Tony Gurria comes up to me, and he's like, "Hey, you all right?" You know, but they had just read him the riot act. You know, if this shit happens again, he was gone probably
Oh,
2 months after that. I would say there was no more. And at the same time too, and again, this sounds horrible. I sound name dropperish as hell, but
Mhm.
uh, Vince McMahon was always back there, right? And he goes,
Oh,
he looks right at me and he goes, and I went, yeah. And he's like, and so
that's
I've had a couple of interactions with him, but they've all kind of been that. Like I remember one time when he actually, I was in catering after doing I had a real good match the night before, and
oh,
he goes, and he came up to me as, or he didn't come up to me. He was walking, and I happened to be in his sight, right? And he goes, Eric, good match last night. And I thought, wow, Vince McMahon knows my first name, so it was
yeah.
fun. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. For Vince to know first names, that's got to be a big thing right there.
I'm
So,
sure he didn't remember it after that, but that's just the kind of guy that guy is, is that everything that was going on with his company, he knew what was going on. He was involved in every aspect of it. So you can bet he watched every match that night, or he was involved with something somehow, at least.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I guess kind of it's just recent news too. But what do you think about him coming back as part of the board of directors now?
Boy, I want to see how it plays out. A lot of people are saying that how it's terrible, but I'm a look. Wrestling wouldn't be what it is today. I think you give the guy the benefit of the doubt. Who knows how it's going to play out? I know that's not much of an answer right there, but I'm going to wait and see how it goes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wasn't somebody who was so quick to jump on the Triple H, like to say, oh yeah, he did fine for 2 weeks and now he's not doing fine. Like, look, it takes a long time, you know what I mean, to change things. They don't just happen overnight. So, you
Right.
know, but if anybody can, turn things around and do things right, I think it's him. I think he's earned that respect from people to say
Hmm.
he's turned it into something that it wasn't before.
Hmm.
Maybe his time has passed, maybe it hasn't. I don't know. We gotta see how it goes.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, I wasn't sure. I was like, I mean, I kind of watch too much social media sometimes, and people are like, "Oh, Vince is gone. He's the devil. Triple H is like our Lord and
Right.
Savior." I'm
Savior, right. Exactly, right.
like, okay,
Probably, neither one are true, right? Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, yeah, Triple H has done some not best things to probably some of the smaller guys back then, but I think he's trying, but like, I don't know if like because I mean these last few years of WWE haven't been the best, but I don't know if it's necessarily Vince or whatever is going on. But yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully they'll get it figured out. And then that's an interesting thing to go from, and I've seen it in, you see it in a lot of places. You go from being one of the boys to being the boss. That's a different
Oh yeah.
world. So you can't, when all you're concerned about for years and years is yourself and how you're getting over and what you need to do for you, it's a
Hmm.
whole other ball game when you not only have to worry about, you got to worry about everybody now, and have your hands in everything. That's a tough job, man.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I didn't realize like kind of the same thing with how Cody Rhodes was like part of I think was it CEO or some management position in AEW in those last
Yeah,
few months he booed him out. I'm like, this is Cody Rhodes. He does a really good job around here, but
yeah, for sure,
yeah.
for sure.
Hmm. He's getting booed around because he's a wrestler and people are saying, oh, he's putting himself over because he's the owner. I'm like, he's doing a good job. I mean, he's Cody Rhodes, so
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Um, oh yeah, yeah, since yeah, with being with Steel Domain, I know a wrestling legend that's come to Steel Domain just to watch a lot of the times, Eddie Sharkey. Do you have any Eddie Sharkey memories from being there
Oh,
or even
I love
before?
talk. Not any particular memory, but every time he's there, I pick his brain and talk to him. And of course, I'm a Harley race guy, right? So him and Harley he knew him really well. And Harley, in fact, if you go back and see if you can find it on YouTube. There's some great, really, really solid matches with Eddie Sharkey and Harley Race, like really good stuff. And so we just, I just chat about that, and we talk about whatever. We talk about the weather. I'm a big wrestling historian, so I'll go
Oh,
ask him about some match or whatever, and just ask him about some guy. And a lot of times he'll just he'll bring something up, and I'm fascinated by it. So yeah, I could listen to that guy talk all day for sure.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of these new guys, like the Ken Anderson's Academy guys, always ask him about stuff like the Rampage Santanas and systems, and they're like
Yeah,
Eddie a lot. It's cool to pick his brain. So
for sure. Two great guys, by the way, Rampage and the System. I'm a big fan of both of those guys. I enjoy watching them. The System is like my favorite gimmick out there. I love it. I think I think he's really good. You know,
oh,
so yeah, and you see that like those guys obviously like. Why wouldn't you ask Eddie Sharkey like everything you can about wrestling? Why would I don't get why people don't talk. I mean, maybe if there's a kernel of truth in everything that he's saying, there's some things that, yeah, okay, maybe that was 50 years ago, but the truth
oh
is
yeah.
truth. You know what I mean? It's not that you're not gonna, and plus it's just fun stories, man. That's life. It's fun to hear experiences from days gone by.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I have a good friend. He's always treating me well, named Ryan, and he always drives Eddie to shows. And I've gotten the chance to all three of us, me, Eddie, and my friend Ryan, just going to shows. I'm in the car with Eddie Sharkey's telling
Right.
all these cool things. Yeah, and to have someone like Eddie Sharkey around, and I'm like only this. I just reached 20 years old. I'm getting wrestling knowledge here. This is really cool.
Absolutely. Yeah. Can't buy that, right? Can't buy it
Oh,
anywhere. Yeah.
yeah. And one day, fortunately, all these guys will be gone, and it'll be really sad. So I'm glad I'm getting these opportunities.
Absolutely. That's a great way to look at it, man. Great way to look at it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, oh yeah, I wanted to get into like a little a name association. So like just a couple names here of guys mainly from today. I just found on like the internet that you guys faced each other, but just a little list of guys, and just want to hear your original thoughts of how you met them, or just your time working with them. So at the first name we got
Okay.
here is
Okay.
oh yeah, oh there you go. Either oh yeah, there we okay. It was
Who was it?
blocking out.
I didn't get that. Who was it?
Yeah, I was gonna say this list of guys wanted to get your opinions about them, just a little name
Yeah.
association game. So first guy is Mitchell Taylor.
Oh, I love Mitchell Taylor. Yeah, I'm a part of a tag team with him in Colorado called the OGs, which I'm not big on the name, but he's a good dude. He's a real fun guy. Lord Mitchell Taylor. I enjoy teaming with him, and I enjoy talking to him. Just I like the fact that I get to see him once a month now.
Yeah, yeah. Are those two guys that you told me you used for the picture, or are those two
Oh,
different
those
other
two
guys?
guys. Those two guys. That's Camaro Jackson and John Webb, and that's a picture from WLW actually.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Uh Niles Plunkett.
I love him. He's a great guy. He's a fantastic friend of mine. I've known him, like I said, I was best man in his wedding. Um, he's a good dude, and I'm really happy that he has latched on to the Niles gimmick. It's worked really well for him. He's really coming to his own. He's a really talented guy and a good
Yeah,
friend.
yeah, definitely. Uh Paul Verk.
Oh, fantastic! He's so much fun. That's a guy that I expect big things from. He's just a very charismatic guy, really funny, talented in the ring, has an interesting, good look. Can't say enough nice things about the guy. I'd love to work with him again.
Yeah. Uh Garrison Creed.
Really intense guy, full bore, puts everything he has into everything. He works, snug, which I love because I'm snug myself, and just a really intense guy, great look, and very passionate. So I expect big things from him too.
Yeah, yeah. Sin Bodhi.
Symbodi, what a great character. I'm lucky enough to be involved in a feud with him right now, as a matter of fact. And matches have been fun. He's an old school guy, and he's unorthodox to say the least. But I think we gel really well, and the Warlord of Weird he's a fun guy to work with for sure. And if you haven't got a chance to see him, he's different. Go see him.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard a little bit about him and a couple good stories, but yeah, they definitely be really cool to see him. So yeah.
Definitely.
Of the Wanderer.
Wanderer, we have had a ton of matches, actually. And I mean, I love those masks, the unique ring gear with the license plates on it. That stuff is cool, and we've had some fun matches, and he's a really talented guy. And I has been influential because a lot of people have wanted to see us wrestle each other in different promotions. So it's been nice to have an opponent like that is also, again, snug and talented too.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. And then just a few more names for the little name association. Devlin Kane.
Oh, super intense. Love the gimmick. Big guy. Very funny, as a matter of fact, and enjoyed being around him. And I've enjoyed all the matches that we've had with him. I've had with him. I think I'm 3 or 4 maybe now, and they've all been good. And I like the guy that I like working with. I don't generally these days get to work with guys that are comparable to my size. I'm a lot of times a lot bigger than guys, and it's nice to work with somebody who's also got some size, so we can brawl a little bit and have some fun.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I almost see you guys like almost twin brothers or half brothers or something. That's pretty much the
Look,
same
I'm
in
bald.
grades.
If I had longer hair, maybe it would work, but I'm bald now. But yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Then last name, since you kind of mentioned him before, Bret Hart.
Oh, what do I think about Bret Hart?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's great. He's so it may not look like it these days, but if you go back and look at pictures of me when I was probably
Oh, yeah.
24 to 27, let's say 28, 30, I had long curly black hair, and people constantly would say,
Oh,
"Man,
yeah.
You look like Bret Hart." Everywhere I went, every show, if I was out, like, "Are you Bret Hart? Or this or that." And I mean, I've got it so much, but definitely an influence on me. I was a big fan of his ever since I was a kid. I loved him when he was with the Hart Foundation, when they were managed by Jimmy Hart. Just always a guy that I really took to, and and it was very flattering. And it's funny because I did a tour of shows. I used to do these shows on military bases, right? We go all over different military bases, and it's back when I had that look. And there's a picture of me in one of the papers,
Mhm.
and I'm looking through. I didn't even really, and I look and I said, "Is that Bret Hart?" I was like, "Holy shit, what's Bret Hart doing?" And it was me. It was a picture of me. So
Oh,
I even fooled myself back in the day.
oh,
Yeah.
wow. Oh,
And
man.
to look at me now, you'd never think that, the beard up, the bald head, all that. But back in the day, yeah, check it out. It's very comparable.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Let's look through Facebook here. North Dakota pro wrestler Bullet Bronson says, "Howdy, fellas." So,
How's it going, man?
yeah.
Thanks for tuning in.
Hmm. And yeah, I think I just got one more question left for you.
Okay.
Just talk about future shows that you have coming up for big 2023.
Well, I had a lot.
Oh, after your injury, of course, but yeah, or stuff you're hoping to do, maybe. Oh,
You're still there?
yep, yeah, there we go.
Sorry, I got a quick interruption.
Oh,
Anyway, yeah, so I got some things booked. I'm really going to take my time with this injury. I'm 50 years old, and I'm going to make sure that everything is completely right before I'm ready to go. But
yeah,
I would expect to see me back in Steel Domain. I'd expect to see me doing some stuff for the NWA fairly soon, hopefully. I'm going to continue to do some stuff for Rocky Mountain Pro. So,
mhm,
and hopefully I'll be back at Rocky Mountain or at River City Championship as well. So hopefully you can catch me on any of those, and I'll be open as long as I'm healthy. Things are going
yeah.
well. I'm set.
Okay, yeah, yeah, definitely. But yeah, I think that's all I got for you. Is
I
awesome
appreciate
talking
it.
to you and just
Awesome
hearing
talking to you
stories.
too. I'm glad we could do it, and hopefully I'll get to see you real soon. soon.
Yeah. I'm sure I'll be at some steel domains early this year or during the summer or something. So yeah.
Fantastic, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. You have a nice night, Derek.
Thanks so much, and thanks to everybody who was watching too. Have a great night.
Yep, you too. All right,
Bye.
fans, we are signing out now. All right, almost there.